Some of you may have been wondering if HP is back. They are seriously back. Good afternoon, morning, and welcome to Turbo Tortoise Tech. If you're new here, I'm Reese of the 4-piece variety or Wooks. We're continuing with some HP goodness with the Victus. I've already done the Omen 16, and this is more of their sort of entry-level gaming crossover work sort of platform. And it's actually not all that entry level. It's quite well catered for, has like some really nice features to it, and it's very simplistic, which I actually really like. It's got a clean, simple finish to it that's not going to make you look juvenile on a boardroom table, which is always a nice thing. It's got a straightforward backlit keyboard, it's got a straightforward setup, but the internals is where this thing absolutely shines, and it's got some of the highest component quality I've actually come across in notebooks at the current state in time. This for me is second best only to one other notebook, which I actually haven't had the good fortune to review. So at this point in time, at this price point, this is basically the best notebook that I've reviewed on this channel. Now I'm going to tell you why. So starting off from the bottom, we have the actual cooling setup. So if you're looking at the picture on the bottom right now, you'll notice that there's two fan vents over there with mesh over the top and with a nicely patterned setup on the bottom. Not a lot of extra space over there, which I thought may have affected the performance, but it actually doesn't at all, which just makes me think that the heat sinks inside of this laptop are incredibly good. Connectivity is pretty nicely catered for. It's got two USB type A's on the right hand side, and then on the left hand side is where things get a lot more spicy. You've got your power connector, you've got your flappy paddle RJ45 for your networking, and HDMI next to that, another type A, a type C, which does have DisplayPort 1.2 on it. Just beware, if you try to DisplayPort out or type C out to an HDMI connector, there are noted issues with doing that because DisplayPort and HDMI don't work on the same communication. Even though they're both digital, they actually have pinouts for different areas, and it can be quite tricky to get that to work. Practically impossible from what I've read. But type C straight to your DisplayPort, especially on a 1.2 classification, is going to work absolutely perfectly. Then just in front of that, you've got your headphone jack and then an SD card reader. And I really like that they've included that, because it's exactly where this notebook is angling, is to be a development / gaming or development work cycle sort of product. Looking at the top deck, we see a really nice keyboard. It is just standard white backlighting, but it's got a really nice feel. It's a scissor switch chiclet style, and generally it's pretty well stabilized. I forgot Play was going to launch that over there, but everything's pretty well stabilized. There's no unpleasant clacking or anything from that. It is then set in so it's not going to get dust going through into the keyboard. And one of the biggest and best touchpads below that. This is honestly pretty much the best touchpad I've used on a notebook like ever that I can think of in memory. This is one of the best. The size and the sensitivity of it were absolutely perfect. I try to use the touchpad as much as humanly possible, unless I'm obviously playing games, but even when I'm doing benchmarking, I use the touchpad wherever necessary, and I never felt the need to connect a mouse, which was really good. Moving further up though, we now have one of this notebook's absolute top parting pieces. Is this 16.1 1080p. It's IPS 144 Hz. And having seen it already on Notebook Check on the previous generation from their 1650 setup, this one has a 3050 Ti, which is obviously considerably better. But this monitor is absolutely incredible. It has one of the best metered or measured color palettes around. If you look at, like I said, the Notebook Check reviews, you'll see that it's literally got the highest DCI-P3 and sRGB ratings amongst laptops of this class. And that's why I think that they've included this card reader, is so that you can use it for film and camera work and stuff on the go. And to that end, you'll see later with the performance that it's actually set up for exactly that. But just above the screen, before we go even near performance, just above the screen, you'll see two little pinhole microphones, so you can use those. They are audible. It's not going to launch your idle scenery, I can guarantee you that. And then the webcam up top. The webcam does have a little bit of an aperture struggle, especially when it's dark. I noticed that if I turn off all the lights, then it literally doesn't have enough aperture control in order to get light in properly for that. But if you do have some pretty decent down lighting or a ring light on you, then it'll do just fine. It is very easy to upgrade from here though. It's not by any means something that you would want to permanently stream off, but if you're just going to use it for Teams meetings or Zoom, etc., then it's going to work quite nicely for that. And speaking of business and that sort of stuff, the chassis and the way that it's been put together is exactly in that line. It's not made to look like an overwrought gaming laptop. This is honestly trying to actually be more business than it is gaming, just by nature of it not having things like RGB backlighting or a big shiny logo on the back. Just a nice tasteful V in the middle, just a design by HP on the top over here, and nothing really else to tell you that it's actually an HP. I also particularly like the rear vent, because I designed a ship in Space Engineers that the back of it literally looked like that, just inverted. So my ship was designed like with that 80s sort of modern style that's coming through at the moment in general in design and automotive and stuff. I really like the way that this one looks at the back. It kind of looks a little Aventador, space fighter, jet fighter sort of esque, and it does actually do a really good job of getting hot air out the back of the notebook. Which is then a nice segue into the performance of this machine. It performs exceptionally well. It's also got an undervolting thing built into it where you can even test your temperatures and stuff with the software now, which has been nicely upgraded. It's not my first run-in with the software. I did the Omen X2 review and, like I said, Omen 16, and it's pretty much par for the course on the sort of functions and stuff you get from them. It's got an optimizer as well, which is kind of nice. It disables things like your Windows key and Alt Tab and stuff, so that you can't really, launch yourself out of game by accident. All of that is put into the notebook like out of box. So you just hit one button and it does all of those optimizations for you to optimize your Windows stuff in your registry and free up RAM and stop unnecessary services. So nice little touch to have that. I really like the undervolting as well, because it gives really good temperature performance, so your boost clocks actually stay higher for longer. It didn't really affect the general performance from what I saw, but the optimized, like you'll see if I show you the Counter-Strike results, for instance, if you look at it from a standard, like out of the box, to putting everything in high performance mode, undervolting, and doing those optimizations, there is like a 10% performance improvement just from doing that. So none of that is superfluous. It actually works, which is really, really nice. And the temperatures on this machine are some of the best I've ever seen. The processor, the 11400H in this instance, hits 74 degrees at its maximum. And as you'll see now on screen, even when running a render load like Cinebench, it doesn't make any noise. It's kind of spooky how well that thing runs without making any noise. It's very, very good. The only time I did find some noise and some increase in its fan output was when I was doing things like Firestrike, where you've got a multi-combined test with doing physics and gaming at the same time. In most games, you're going to hear a mild hum from the fans at worst. And as well, I think the peak that I saw was about 76 degrees on the GPU, which is well within the specifications for it to keep its boost up as well. So overall performance from this laptop is exceptionally good. And that's why I'm like, maybe HP is back. Battery life as well, 5 hours and 20 minutes worth of continuous video playback was what I was able to get from this. On battery, it can game. It can actually game. You are going to get about 20% performance loss from it, but it was pretty damn smooth. It didn't jitter or stutter or anything like that. So obviously the circuitry between the battery and the other components is very good because it can supply the wattage that it needs to, even from the battery. The power brick is a 200 watt brick as well, so pretty convincing, more than enough wattage for both a 3050 Ti and an 11400H. One of them, like maybe little bit superfluous things that it does have is audio by B&O, which is its laptop speakers that are firing out the bottom front of the thing. They're just not going to sound amazing. It's just never going to be the case, unfortunately, which is just kind of the norm for these sort of things. I think there's been one laptop ever that I tested where I was like, that's pretty good. And that thing was absolutely enormous. This thing is tiny. It's very, very small. It's very, very sleek, very, very slim. I love that the keyboard's got a numpad on it as well. Just goes more into that sort of business environment. And hey, maybe I want to play a game of CS, or maybe I want to, even play Cyberpunk on medium settings. It actually plays at a pretty high level. But typically with RTX 3050s and RTX 3050 Ti's, you run into VRAM problems. So as soon as you hit that limit of your 4 gig VRAM, that's your limit. And it's not actually the core that's limiting your performance, it's the 4 gig VRAM. It's just not enough for 1080p. That's not HP's fault though. That's how NVIDIA has configured these systems to get their scaling of performance, which I just don't really like. I just give it 6 gig VRAM, give the 3060 8 gig VRAM and make it slightly more expensive, because in mobile, you guys are basically unchallenged. And then it'll actually saturate the core fully on these NVIDIA graphics cards. Only things that really saturated the core fully were things like CS and Dota, which run off 2 gigs of video memory. So nothing that, you're not going to be able to do AAA on big frames with high settings just because of that VRAM. It still hurts my soul just a little bit. In conclusion then though, this is one of the best notebooks you can buy, genuinely. If this thing is at the right price, compared to its competitors, let's just say if it's at the same price, literally there's only one notebook, which I'm not going to mention because I haven't been able to review it, but I have used them extensively, that I would suggest over this. But they often drive quite a lot higher price. These are starting at about 17K for your 3050 editions, and then ones like this are closer to 21,000. And at that price point, it might just be worth it for you, especially if you're using this for Adobe or photography, videography, etc. This is one of legitimately the best screens I've ever used. For color grading and stuff, it's going to be impeccably good on the go. I'll show you the Parrot as well with the red feathers. What I often notice with a lot of monitors is specifically with red, because of how the color light spectrum works, they tend to bleed out the edges. Red, is a shorter wavelength than blue, is why a lot of radiographers and stuff use red goggles and stuff. So if that's bleeding out, your blue spectrum light, which is a much longer wavelength, is going to distort even more. So that red Parrot is very specifically selected for that sort of testing, and you can see each individual feather absolutely perfectly on this monitor. There's no bleed out around the edges of that. So yeah, they've done a very, very, very good job over here. One of the best notebooks you can buy, legitimately. Very good job, HP. I'm more than impressed. Even things like this, just as an example, how strong the hinges on this notebook. It picks up the bottom of the notebook. That's the sort of strength of here. And if I lift on one corner, you can see how uniformly that comes up. The reason we do that test is a lot of the times users will use one corner extensively. They'll try and open the notebook at the same place, same way all the time, and then the screen will actually flex and bend and break. So none of that here. Everything just, this is a really, at the price, like I said, it's literally almost unbeatable. Anywho, that's all I have for you in this review. If you have enjoyed it, please do hit us up with a like and subscribe, and I will see you on the flip side.